In the video I made on the original Last Stand game, I described it as iconic, simple but immersive, unique, and very fun to play. And if I were to sum up The Last Stand 2, it would just be a perfect version of the first one. The gameplay changes from arcadey and repetitive to meaningful, choice-based, and evolving because you're given a purpose. You're traveling cross-country to get to the port city where the evacuation is taking place, and you only have 40 days. That city being Union City. And they use this story to add features like the map, which is amazing, and upgrade every single mechanic that was already great in the first game. If you haven't already watched the first video, I recommend you watch it first or just watch it after this. And if you want to see the Union City video, make sure you subscribe and leave a like or comment to motivate me to start it early. Also, the games are available on Steam. Make sure you buy them and support the dev. This takes place straight after the end of the first game with our favourite survivor, Jack. The helicopter at the end of the first game had somebody who was infected, so long story short, it crashed. And you are the only survivor. You now have to travel on foot from where you've landed all the way to Union City, going through different cities and towns as you travel. And this traveling from town to town is the basis of all of the gameplay in this game, and the reason it is so great. You actually create the story yourself, unlike in the first game where it's just the same thing repeated over and over. Each area themselves have their own story. You have a unique place to defend yourself from, so it could be in a store with a bunch of crates in front of you, it could be in a church with pews in front of you, it could be in the military base, and it gives a lot of character to the place you're going to, along with the map, which is also localized. In a small town, they'll just have farmhouses and big houses that take a lot more time to search, as well as certain types of weapons like shotguns in the farm area or RPGs in the military place. And I love how it gives you a diary entry to start the game, putting you straight into that immersive atmosphere, telling you exactly what happened in the previous game. It shows you a cutscene showing what happened on the helicopter, and the diary tells you about your goal of getting to Union City before the 40 days are up. And then every time you go to a new area, it shows you another diary entry that Jack writes, which gives you tips on the area, as well as just a really nice immersive atmosphere. You start on day 40 of the apocalypse because it takes place after the end of the first game, which I absolutely love. This ups the difficulty because you start with all of the variations of zombies, unlike the first game. And they even add in these green zombies to show how they've aged and are decomposing, which is a really nice and immersive touch. I feel like there's so much more variety in the models of zombies in this game too, which is always a good thing. It really gives the impression that everything has collapsed. You have all of the different types of police and army, as well as news reporters, priests. And on that note, I want to mention one of the coolest mechanics, which is that some of the zombies hold weapons and use them against your survivors. I think I remember this happening in the first game, but it's not as common in the first game and a lot less likely because in this game all of the survivors are positioned at the front, though every single one of them is vulnerable to the zombie strikes. So let's talk about the biggest change, which is the map and the traveling system. I love this because it actually gives you something to work towards. In the first game, it was more arcadey in terms of the gameplay because it was kind of the same thing over and over with no real sight in end, apart from just the out of 20 nights at the top, which kind of spoils how long the game is going to be. In this game, you have a deadline of 40 days and you can take as little or as long time as you want. Granted, it's within those 40 days. So you can end the game super early if you speedrun it, but you can also take your time and explore and look around if you want to. And it increases the replayability so much, especially if you're choosing different places to go to. I know when I started this game, I chose to go to a town with a smaller population than a bigger one, because another awesome mechanic that they've included is that the higher the population, the more zombies and harder it will be. And on top of that, the way you search for stuff is completely different, and the weapons you get are actually locked in certain cities, which is fantastic. It makes it so that you're rewarded if you do go to a harder place and gives a bit of a personality to each location. you now associate weapons with those locations as well as the difficulty, so it makes it feel like an actual place in your mind that you're planning to go to. Like, should I go to Whistler's Grove or Aspenwood? Well, Whistler's Grove has this weapon and this weapon, but Aspenwood has this weapon and this weapon, and even though it has those weapons, the population is this amount compared to Whistler's Grove, so I'm not feeling too confident right now. I don't have too many survivors or great weapons. I might just go to Whistler's Grove. Those are the sorts of decisions you'll need to be making along the way, which is awesome because you do actually feel like a survivor trying to figure out what the next step is and what's less likely to get you killed, but also more likely to get items that will keep you safe. And my favorite area by far has to be the military base. I actually always avoided this as a child because it was just unnecessary and seemed really dangerous, because you can just go straight to Union City if you have enough supplies. But how wrong I was. I went there in one of my recent runs, and this place has the most broken weapons ever. The LMG, the M249 SAW, or whatever it's called, along with the RPG. Oh my god, these guns are incredibly destructive, and it gives you such a power fantasy while you're using them, which is a really nice switch up from the general gameplay, which is trying to survive. The more you learn about this game and the more you play it, the more fun you have. And with the map system, the searching system got changed a lot, which is great because the original searching system was just a bit too basic and gamey. You might have been doing it on a clipboard, but just putting down the number of hours you'll be doing stuff isn't very fun or immersive, because it just feels too much like a game, especially with how you're separating time between looking for survivors and guns on top of the weaponometer. That just didn't seem realistic, because if you're going to be looking for survivors, they could have guns, or they could just be guns in those places that you look. I'm sure if you visited a house to look for survivors, they might also or only have a gun there, and it's very likely to have survivors in like a gun store or something. So that system didn't really make sense, and it was a bit too simplistic for its purpose. In The Last of Us 2, they absolutely nail it. Instead of your clipboard, you get a map of the town you're in with points of interest along with their names and the amount of hours it'll take you to search them. This is so good because it really gives that experience of being in a zombie apocalypse and feels realistic. You'll just have like a paper map in front of you and decide which buildings to hit, which would be most likely to have survivors or weapons. And on top of that, there's different types of buildings. You can have a police station, a shop, a park, a house, and I haven't checked because I don't want to know, but I think the places you search will also impact the chance of you finding a certain thing there. So, for example, a gun store is much more likely to have guns than survivors, and a home is much more likely to have survivors than guns. So now you don't have to worry about splitting the search time between survivors and guns. Both happen at the same time, and then you can kind of prioritize between the two by choosing certain locations. And on top of that, you now have a new resource, supplies, which is actually really good because it paces the game really well. You now, instead of jumping from one area to the other and just completely speedrunning it and ignoring absolutely everything, you now have to choose to scavenge the town, to look for those supplies, to take on your journeys to the next place. Say the distance is 3 days worth, you need 3 days worth of supplies to get there. And this puts even more pressure on the player, because even though they can skip town and not bother repairing their barriers, which I also think is really cool because it gives that feeling of escaping by the skin of your teeth, it would also be too much if you could just do that at any time. In this case, it's kind of random how many supplies you get in each run, which means that this randomness adds to your replayability because it makes every single journey unique, as well as making you actually earn your traveling time. On some, it might take you forever to get the supplies to get to the next area. On others, you might get to the next area really fast, or get enough supplies to skip an area, or to actually visit all of the areas on the map. I recently tried this, and that's actually the game you're being shown. I wanted to see if you could visit every single location on the map and get out in time, and it is possible, which is another way for experienced players like myself to go in and have fun and challenge themselves. Next is the survivors. They also managed to improve them. They can be found in any building you visit, which adds to that natural feeling of deciding which buildings and points of interest to go to. They still affect how much of the barriers you can repair, which is awesome, and on top of that you can now equip them with weapons, which is amazing. I felt so annoyed in the first game seeing them going around with pistols when I had better weapons to give to them. So you're allowed to do a lot more with your survivors, making them much more useful rather than just NPCs in a game. Although you are just limited to 4, but I think this is the perfect amount. 6 would just be overkill. Zombies with weapons show up from the start, and it looks like they actually target your survivors because they walk towards survivors much more often and they swing at them and kill them if they get close enough, which is a mechanic I love, especially since I'm still salty that they are absolute snakes and will leave me alone to get eaten by zombies when I'm the one who found them and has given them weapons to defend themselves with. So I'm not going to pretend like I didn't feel satisfied after seeing them get chopped. And if you want to know what happens next in the story, make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss the Union City video when it comes out. The devs have uploaded it to Steam, so make sure you buy it. It's so much fun and a very unique experience, especially in such an oversaturated genre. Please let me know what you think of the video in the comments, and let me know what books, movies, games, or manga you want me to go over next. See ya!